Welcome, Professor Bill Maley, Professor of Diplomacy at the ANU College of Diplomacy. You've spoken earlier today at our symposium about the issue of refugees, and I wonder if you could just touch on quickly, why is this relevant for Australian diplomacy?
It's partly because Australia has been a country receiving refugees in recent years, both as a matter of conscious policy through resettlement, but also because, as a liberal democracy, Australia has been an attractive destination for people who are fleeing persecution. If you are trying to escape from persecution, you don't head to another country where you might either face continued persecution or you might find yourself thrust to the margins of society. So that's been the principal reason why Australia has been deeply focused on this issue. But of course, it's also an important issue of international policy and has been for more than 60 years.
And an issue that we're starting to see really gain momentum around the world.
Indeed, we're seeing huge issues in Europe as a result of people fleeing disorder and disturbances in the Middle East and North Africa. And it's a kind of ironical mark of this that on the very day that European leaders were assembling in Vienna to discuss solutions to the problem, a truck was found with the awful contents of dead asylum seekers or people seeking refuge in the back, having apparently come from Hungary.
So Australia's really not alone in dealing with or addressing the issue of refugees. But what would you say would be the core challenges for the Australian context?
Well, one, I think, is a challenge of maturity, that the issue has been projected for more than 15 years now as if Australia were under siege from vast numbers of people seeking asylum, whereas in fact Australia's geographical isolation means that the proportion of refugees who seek to secure protection in Australia is nonetheless tiny compared to what many other countries confront. And of course, if one squawks excessively under those circumstances, it also creates an image in the wider world of what kind of country one is, and that then can feed back into difficulties with public diplomacy.
And so, I guess, building on that issue, what do you see are the implications of Australian responses to refugee issues in terms of our regional and our global reputation?
I think it's a difficult kind of problem because Australia, of course, until the mid-60s and arguably the early 70s, maintained the White Australia policy. And when in 2001 the then Prime Minister began to say that Australia alone had the right to determine who should come and under what circumstances, this revisited an item of rhetoric that had been used for many years to justify the White Australia policy. And of course, people in the region hadn't forgotten that. So there is always the danger that one can, by one's current actions, revive memories of what kind of actor one was in the past, and that then has ramifications for one's image in the here and now.
One more question that really relates to the role of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. I guess it's not a straightforward issue because there are other government agencies involved, and I wonder if you could just touch on that briefly.
Yes.
What the challenges.
One of the real difficulties is that the lead agency in this area is the Department of Immigration and Border Protection, which doesn't necessarily have Australia's international image at the forefront of its concerns when it is taking particular policy steps. And a case I cite with some amusement there was from around 2001 when an Australian immigration minister was travelling in the Middle East with a glossy brochure in Persian and Arabic, which no one had noticed was printed backwards. And this was potentially very embarrassing for the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, which had not been consulted about that particular information program, and staff were incandescent with anger when they discovered what it was that the minister's party had planned to distribute.
That's really quite fascinating, and an issue for public diplomacy and soft
power. Very much. I think in the area of public diplomacy, there are 2 points that stand out. One is that coordination across different agencies of government is vital, because there's nothing that's more off-putting for a recipient audience than different agencies pulling in different directions. But I think the other lesson from that is that one can invest an enormous amount of money in public diplomacy only to have the investment undone, as it were, by some clumsy act that creates a stronger impression in the minds of the recipient audience than all the public diplomacy campaign may have done.
Well, look, thank you very much, Professor Maley. Great pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.